last summer I did a run where I think I was at the F1 and then the tennis, and then I went and did cricket, and then I went to Northern Ireland and was doing golf, and then I did a week on Tour de France cycling, having never watched any cycling before, which I got to the end of and just, my brain was fried, but I was so interested in everything that had happened. And then in the 96th, 97th minute, Esteban scores the winner and Stamford Bridge goes absolutely ballistic and Enzo Maresca's sprinting down the touchline. And I just had my head in my hands. The James Haskell one was really interesting because it feels like a relatively unique opportunity that I'm still not even sure I've had again now. I mean,
for episode 23 of How to Be a Journalist, we have a Press Awards 30 under 30 journalist with George Sims. He is currently a sports reporter at The Observer and the SJA Young Sports Writer of the Year for 2023. George is most definitely somebody who's built a reputation for thoughtful and impactful sports journalism. However, sometimes it is better to let George do the speaking himself. So welcome to the How to Be a Journalist podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I'm good. It's a day off, which in a completely chaotic industry is always nice to be able to unwind slightly and collect your thoughts before you have to dive back into it again.
Okay, absolutely fantastic. So talk to me through what a day in the life of George Sims as a sports reporter at The Observer looks like.
I don't think there are too many days or weeks that look the same. Everything's geared towards Sunday with it being a Sunday paper, but we obviously have to balance sort of digital output with working towards getting a paper out with a very small team. And so you're always trying to balance what's directly ahead of you with planning ahead and making sure everyone's at all the right events at all the right time. This week, for example, I mean, tomorrow I'm going to play paddle with one of my colleagues to write about the current paddle boom and whether it's a good thing. And then on Thursday, I'm going to the Wimbledon Squash Championships to interview the current world number one and to write about him as a person. He's got allegations of cheating against him and stuff, so I want to go and speak to him about that and investigate what that actually looks like.
How is it like covering so many different sports, and like is that the sort of thing that you're looking to get into when you first decided that becoming a sports journalist would be for you?
I don't know if it's immediately what I thought I'd get into, but I love doing it. I can't say it's not stressful trying to be across everything and feel like you need to keep sort of base knowledge topped up in a lot of different sports. You definitely can't feel like you're a specialist, I guess, in any more than maybe two or three, but it's having that sort of base understanding of wider ones, be able to drop in and out and understand that there are, I guess, fundamental tenets of sport that go across all different sports, that if you can get the hang of, that you can quite easily shift from one to the other. I mean, yeah, last summer I did a run where I think I was at the F1 and then the tennis, and then I went and did the cricket, and then I went to Northern Ireland and was doing golf, and then I did a week on Tour de France cycling, having never watched any cycling before, which I got to the end of and just, my brain was fried, but I was so interested in everything that had happened that I just had an amazing time because I love learning more and more, and I think that's a massive part of why I like doing so many different sports. It's just I love learning about the people involved. I love learning why people care about them and, yeah, getting into other people's passions.
Yeah, and I guess as well, like if I could go straight to the Tour de France then, for example. So when you were starting off, covering it, and you'd never done any cycling before, what was your headspace? Like, how did you think it was going to work out? Just put me in your mind.
So I've got a friend who actually met and we did NCTJ together at News Associates, who's a cycling journalist. So I called him up when I found out I was going to go and said, I'm going to need some pointers. And so he gave me a bit of help. But basically I turned up on a Monday evening in France with a rental car in just outside Marseille and some Airbnb bookings in what turned out to be very inconvenient locations, and went from there. And when I actually got to meet the sort of cycling pack who'd been there 2 weeks already and all said, what on earth are you doing driving around on your own? You must be absolutely insane. I didn't realise I was insane. It turned out from doing it and having to navigate mountains and stuff on my own that it was absolutely insane. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. And I'd spent obviously, as I said, I've been busy in the build-up, but while I was at other events and stuff, I've been reading cycling books and reading all the Tour de France coverage of different places. And I think reading is such a massive part of this job, and just consuming as much information as possible and trying to make sense of it. And so I picked out a few books that I read to try and get more of a feel for it and understand a bit more about the history of the Tour de France, but also why people love cycling and what motivates cyclists and them as people. And so that, I think, helped give me a bit of a grounding when I turned up, so that I half knew what I was looking for, even if I didn't know exactly what was going to be in front of me.
Like, did you have any really cool conversations with any of the cyclists, or was there a specific moment that really stuck with you while you were out there?
I think the moments that stick with me were the two mountain stages I covered, which I had to drive up and down, which were an absolute nightmare because you've got everyone along the side of the road waiting for the cyclists to come, like throwing, ringing cowbells in your ear, and there are promotional people throwing like cans of Orangina and stuff in your window, and I'm trying not to have an aneurysm. But I think that's the main thing I remember. But there's also relatively good access in cycling to the riders, and so after races you'll often get to sort of walk up to the big buses that they all travel around in, and chat to some of them, and chat to the certainly before races, and slightly less after, where you can chat to the riders and team bosses about what happened and what they think the days are going to look like. And so I just remember the size of it, and turning out there's these incredibly fancy buses that they've got like washing machines built into the side of, which is the sort of thing you'll never imagine. But yeah.
And I guess as well, do you think is it a little bit like a pressurized scenario? And when you are like under the cosh, or you have to get an article or get an interview really, really quickly, and it's really pressured, how do you cope with it almost? Especially when you've got like a one-man team like that sometimes.
Well, I'm quite lucky with what we do as a sort of Sunday outlet, that I often have slightly more time than other people. So when I went out to do the tour, I was only really aiming to write one longer piece on the experience. And so it wasn't as much, I'm going to write up these quotes and I'm going to write up what's happened today. It was just making notes. I mean, I got to this, so I mainly was going to write on the Friday and Saturday night in the Airbnb I was in, and I sat down with that. I had like 47 pages of notes that I had to turn into something that made sense, because I've just been writing down and I've gone, that's interesting, that quote was great, and I've just that thing was funny that happened, and so I've got these thousands of notes in my phone and on my laptop, and I'm trying to make sense of it. And so I'm quite lucky that I don't often have as much time pressure. My main time pressure situations are at Premier League games on Saturday evenings or Saturday afternoons, right before our deadline, which can get really really hard work sometimes, especially when we're we really try and do stuff that feels thoughtful and analytical, and we haven't just told you exactly what's happened or rushed something out. And so trying to balance that with the fact that there might be a 97th minute goal coming right as I need to file something can get pretty stressful, but those tend to be the hardest days, yeah.
I mean, has there been an occasion where that has happened, where you were, and I'm sure many a times, but is there one in particular that sticks with you?
Yes, yeah. So I think it would be last October, Chelsea played Liverpool at Stamford Bridge, and I knew I was going to write about Chelsea because I had to sort of plan that ahead, and so I'd started writing, and a few things I knew that would sort of hold up to be relatively timeless, and so I sort of prepped that, and Liverpool took relatively early lead, and that they held for quite a lot of the game. I was like, okay, good. I can lean slightly more into, my opinion at the time, or my opinion still, which was relatively negative towards Chelsea's ownership and executives. And so I was sort of pushing more into that, and then Chelsea equalised. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to try and balance this. And then actually I'd filed my initial piece on 85, 90 minutes because it was going to be helpful to the team in the office. And then in the 96th, 97th minute, Esteval scores the winner, and Stamford Bridge goes absolutely ballistic, and Enzo Maresca's sprinting down the touchline. Yeah. And I just had my head in my hands. Not quite knowing what to do, knowing that even if I stood by everything I wrote, that it wasn't going to be the day that Chelsea fans wanted to read anything remotely negative about their club, and having to panically rewrite some sort of top and bottom on the piece because it needed to look slightly different, but ultimately standing by that one result not changing everything that I'd written, because I didn't think that was true, but also knowing that the next day I was going to have a lot of Chelsea fans asking why I hate their club, because that's how this stuff works.
Yeah, I guess as well, like in that situation where, because Chelsea winning at the Bridge, I remember that exact goal. It was a really good goal, finished by Esteban as well. And I remember seeing some of the TikTok videos of like the Chelsea gates, of where they're banging the gates. Yeah. So in that situation, you're just like, oh my gosh, they're banging the gates over there. I've got to lock in and finish this article over here.
Yeah.
I can see that being a little bit intense, but also it must be fun, right?
I think it is. I think you can reflect back on it and think that adrenaline rush was fun, but
Yeah.
I am someone that ideally likes having slightly more time to be able to write. I think, yes, you can produce better things under time pressure sometimes, but I've got some friends and colleagues who are incredibly skilled at writing under time pressure, which is a skill in itself, but isn't my specialism at all.
Yeah.
I would always prefer to have 8 hours sat in a dark room thinking about something with a big pile of books and a laptop.
Yeah, I guess as well, like, works into a nice segue about a couple of the articles that you wrote. So I'm assuming we'll start with the James Haskell piece on ADHD. You gave him time to speak, and you really showed, I think you showed an honest version of himself. But I guess what I'm trying to ask as well, when you have pieces like that where you're taking your time and making sure that you do somebody's story justice, how did you go about like honing that skill?
The James Haskell one was really interesting because it feels like a relatively unique opportunity that I'm still not even sure I've had again now. So, I mean, I was at News Associates when I wrote this piece, and so I had this amazing privilege of time to go out and try and find really interesting stories. And a lot of the stuff I was doing at that time was around neurodivergence in sport. It's a massive passion of mine that I still try and do stuff on when I have time. But I found that James had mentioned in an interview maybe 5 years earlier, just off the cuff, that he'd been diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and that he had never really done anything about it, and it wasn't really picked up past that in that interview. And so I reached out to him and said, I'd love to speak to you more about this. He said, I've never really spoken to anyone about it, but yeah, go for it. And so I basically got to just do a therapy session for an hour with James Haskell, which was an incredible opportunity, but it required a balance of him being very open and willing to talk about it, which is not something you always get in every interview, and combined with, I guess, a specialist knowledge that I have of the situation that is something I've honed over years, and I think that specialism can really help. I think it could be a really big thing, especially for a lot of young journalists, if you can have topics that you know more about, even the sort of the big dogs in the industry about. And so I then, was able to go into that interview, and I guess I felt like I was in control, which is not something you always get in interviews, and I was able to help direct him. And then writing it up, because he was so honest, it's very easy to portray him in an honest way. Because he was so open, a lot of that was sort of steering him more than trying to get him to go specifically somewhere I wanted him to go, or feeling like I really had to push him on topics, or try and ask lots of difficult second follow-up questions and stuff, because he was really engaged and willing to talk about stuff.
When you have a person like James Haskell, who has he's quite notable, he's a celebrity in his own right, does well on the good, the bad, the rugby, really good podcaster, also a DJ, does all these different things as well. How do you go about really facilitating a calm environment?
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially when you have a lot of these interviews have time pressure. Someone like James is incredibly busy.
Yeah.
And again, it can really help if they're inherently more trusting and willing to talk, because you have to try and build up a rapport quite quickly to help people understand that, not that you're on their side, because that's not what good journalism should be, but that you know what you're talking about and you're going to be fair to them.
Yeah.
And I think establishing that quite quickly is not always easy, but really important to do for a good interview. And so even if you've only got 20 minutes with someone, if you spend the first 90 seconds, 2 minutes just chatting to them a bit and showing them a bit about yourself and, talking to them a bit about them off the record, I think that can help them really get a bit of trust. Because I think I probably had 40 minutes with something with James, which was a great opportunity, and we got to talk about all sorts of stuff. But to go from having never met someone before to them talking about relatively serious stuff that happened in their childhood or their deep inner feelings now is not something that comes easily for many people. But I think luckily with someone like James, and actually it's been a benefit of a lot of the stuff I've done around neurodivergence in sport, is that I think often people with ADHD in particular can be more willing to be open more quickly, which has been, really nice to be able to get some real open interviews. I mean, a piece at a similar time, which was around footballers with ADHD. There was a guy called Ricky Miller who I got a phone number off at someone I'd been speaking to around neurodivergence, and I'd texted him a couple of times saying, would you be up for this interview? He hadn't replied. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to call him. Sort of expected that, if he hadn't replied to me, he wasn't going to want to talk to me at all. Yeah. And so I called him, and he instantly picked up and was like, I'm so sorry I haven't replied. I've just been really busy and I'm a bit all over the place. And for the next hour and a half, he just unloaded his entire life story on me in incredible detail. And he was fascinating to talk to, and he was incredibly raw and vulnerable, and it was just this utterly bizarre interview where I'm sat at my desk and this guy's telling me again all his sort of deepest secrets that he's clearly wanted to talk to people about, and no one had ever really asked, which was a really nice thing around a lot of the stuff I got to do around neurodivergence, is that no one else was really doing it, and there was all these people that really wanted to tell their stories and really wanted to feel like someone was willing to understand them that no one had really tried before.
Yeah, I guess you're just giving him a platform basically to tell his story, but also it is still at the behest of good journalism at the end of the day. So what do you think are the biggest three main hallmarks of a successful and really good interview? It's difficult to put it down to three.
It is. I think balance is a really good place to start. As I said before, you can't go in wanting to be someone's friend or wanting to impress them, however big and famous they are. You can't go in with the attitude that, I want this person to like me, or I want, to impress them in some way. You need to go in with the sort of right journalistic principles, and I think that will help the whole thing be more balanced. Interviews that just turn out to be puff pieces are always missing something. Like, you need to be able to show balance of everything. I remember I interviewed Ellie Kildunn last year, the England rugby player. It's absolutely amazing. But I had about 25 minutes with her. But she was really interesting to talk to, but really clearly overconfident, potentially to the point of arrogance. Yeah. And when I was then writing up her story, it was finding the balance of showing that this is a incredible rugby player is doing and is going to do amazing things. But also, if there is a flawed side to her, it's probably around her ego and doing that without, gratuitously hurting her if she's going to read it, but reflecting in as fair a way as possible the person I met and the person that I think, she is. Yeah. And so I think that balance is a really big thing. Listening, I think, is a really big thing. I think especially when you have time-pressured interviews, you can often go in with this really tight list of questions that you've spent ages honing perfectly, and then someone will say something in that interview that actually you weren't really listening to because you were just waiting to get on to the next question in the perfect way. And then you'll listen back and be like, why didn't I ask more about that? Why didn't I expand on that? Why wasn't I more open with that? Because I think sometimes I can worry that if I go into an interview and I don't have all the questions written down in perfect order, I'm going to go off and lose track, or we'll run out of questions and it won't be perfect. And so I can often try and make these things too tight. And actually, sometimes you do just want to let the interview go where this person wants it to go, or where topics come up on the spot that you're not expecting, and that will mean that that's where you get the stories that people have never told before, or the piece of information that no one else knows. So I think those two are pretty big. And then apart from that, it's being nice. Like, it's just not being, not going in and instantly being like, I'm going to skewer you, even if it's, someone that ultimately you are trying to get something specific out of. Just it goes in with the balance, just trying to be fair and nice and, not overly so, but just, I am a nice, reasonable person who is going to treat you like a nice, reasonable person.
Yeah, no, okay. So I guess listening, being a decent human being, and also
the balance.
And balance as well. In terms of 3 different things, I think that works out quite nicely as well. Because, you want to avoid from creating puff pieces and playing somebody's greatest highlights the entire interview. So I guess... All right, I'm even going to note that down for myself. You heard it here first. That might be a social clip. But, okay, so then now I want to talk about your time at the Eye before the Observer. So you spent nearly 3 years, or was it like 2 years? And like 7
Yeah. So I started at the Eye on my weekly work placement while I was at News Associates. There every Wednesday, turned up as a very keen work experience kid and just had an amazing time and basically wouldn't leave at any point. There's great people there trying to do really great stuff or doing really great stuff. And it was the perfect environment for me at that point of my career where I could go in, and once I sort of showed that I was capable of doing things like read and write, that they had work for me to do. Because a lot of the time you can go in on work experience and you do end up, maybe making a tease is a stereotype, but yes, doing more research or not being able to produce as much stuff. And actually they trusted me very quickly to be able to go out and do journalism, which was a great opportunity for me because balanced with the time I had from doing News Associates. That's a real privilege you get early while you're studying, that I was able to go and find lots of stories. And so I started as work experience, and then around the 2022 World Cup, they had some freelance shifts that came up, and so I started doing a few freelance shifts, which I did for a year, first alongside my course and then basically full time. And then in December of 2023, a full-time job came up as sports news reporter that I ended up getting, and I spent then nearly 18 months doing that, which was great. It's a real mixture of sort of desk-based live news reporting and being able to get out to games and events and build contacts and build expertise and just have great experiences.
Yeah. I guess if we take it back a little bit to your time at NA and while you were on work experience or on placement, what advice would you have for the people listening at home that potentially had an opportunity to go to maybe a local paper or a national paper? They're on placement and they have, around 8 hours a week to make an impression and actually get them to trust them, like how it worked out with you. What would you say is the best way to go about doing exactly that? So to bring the attention of the editors and those that could potentially get you a job.
Well, I think there can be a sort of impulse, especially the earlier you are in your career, that you really just want bylines and you want to, it's about volume and about doing as much as possible. And actually, I don't necessarily think that's always the best way to get started or get noticed. I think if you can do a few things that are really high quality, whether that's exclusive work or just original work or stuff that's really well researched and thought through and that you've spoken to lots of people, as I said, like the time you have even around the course and around your placement, spend as much time as that's possible trying to produce a few pieces that will really show that you can stand out. And I think that's what I was able to do with my neurodivergence stuff while I was at the Eye. And I think that's then what helped launch my career from there, because there was something that I was a specialist in that I could, I guess, compete or be better at some of the biggest names in the industry at. It's a very, very small and specific patch, but there was something that, I remember when I went to the Sports Journalist Awards the following year, I got chatting to one of my heroes who said, "Oh, you're the guy that does the ADHD and football stuff." I was like, "Yes, I'm more than happy to be that." And that shows that, you've read something, you've engaged with it, you've remembered it. And that really helps you build up a bit of a name and reputation, whether it is in finding a niche or specialist subject that you do, or there's just a few things that, I think being a regional or local paper is a really, really great place to start, because you can very quickly become a specialist in something. You can very quickly build up a real range of local contacts and find stories that other people just aren't looking at. Because, I mean, especially like somehow local journalism has been decimated in the way it has. I had such great experiences doing in student journalism beforehand while I was at university, that finding stories that no one else had even bothered to go anywhere near, that ended up being like absolutely great stuff.
I guess as well, when it comes to your time on student media, let's go into a little bit more about that. Tell me about Plamedi and the lessons that you learned as, what, did you start off as just a reporter and you worked up to sports editor?
Yeah, so I never thought I was going to be a journalist. COVID hit and I was sat in a room at home, realising I had no idea what I wanted to do in my life. And so I was then about to start my third year of uni. I did languages, so I was going to go on a year abroad, and I knew I had a bit of time to try a few different things. And so I started doing a few opinion pieces for the student paper, because I was young and bolshy and opinionated. I was doing political stuff mainly, which I discovered very quickly makes you very angry and miserable. And I'd always loved sport, and so when I just did a few pieces for the sports team, and then when the sports editor role came up in the summer, I applied for it and got it, which was just amazing, because I then got to spend just an entire year throwing myself into sports journalism, learning about it. And we had a real focus on doing local stories in Durham, whether that's stuff around the university or my favourite thing I did, which was looking into a 11th tier local football club that ended up being completely mismanaged and run into the ground. And I mean, that ended up being a story that I got hold of for so long, and became such a big thing that actually when I got to the Eye, I was able to say, guys, I know you don't normally do stories about 11th tier football clubs, but I promise if you trust me to like write this up for you and show it, it's a really good story. And they ended up running it. It was really well read. And I think that helped, then build that trust when we talked about that earlier. But student media is just an amazing resource, because you're surrounded by talented, passionate people who you can learn from all the time. And there's just interesting stories everywhere. You've got nothing but time. And so you can chase as many ridiculous leads or send out as many speculative interview emails as you can possibly want to. And you can take risks and learn what you're good at, and maybe what you need to get better at, and what you really enjoy doing, and what you'd like to do more of, and you can actually go out and do it. Like it's just an incredible resource. Like I can't be more pro student journalism, or if you've ever liked writing or considered journalism, I think it's just an amazing thing to go out and try if you've got the opportunity. Like
student media it's very much how to be a journalist common thread. Like immediately I remember I had an episode with Sean Elvin, who's at The Independent, as digital news editor there, and she spoke about student media in a similar sort of vein, where it's like you have the opportunity to try all these different facets of journalism when you don't necessarily are sure that maybe journalism is great for you, but then you get a taste of it, and there are so many people that are they're passionate, and you end up 5-10 years later actually working alongside a few of them, and it's a cool experience like that. So has there been anybody from your time back at Durham that you've actually seen in the journalism sphere? Yeah, I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of the people, so I see a lot of them. I mean, there's people in great jobs doing amazing things. From the sports team, I mean, there's one of my former co-editor used to work here at Sportsbeat, actually, and one of my deputy editors is now a radio journalist. But from across the paper, I mean, so many people that are in political journalists working for different places and different papers. It's I think Durham in particular, Plamedi is an amazing resource, and we also had a really good group of people who have gone on to do really impressive things, and so it's been really nice watching them, but also really nice, the same as the friends you make at News Associates, really nice to have people to go through early career journalism with, because it can be hard and demoralizing and brutal, and having people that understand that and that can give you some tips and support is a really, really nice thing and an invaluable resource. Okay, fantastic. And the fact that as well that we had the News Associate shout out there is always good. So now I want to go into the game section of the podcast. There are 2 games in the podcast. Is the mid-episode one.
Okay.
So this one I'm going to call Find That Story. And I actually just do it off the... So I just work it out. And I try to like just direct it for each lesson, for each guest. So let's say, for example, you've been dropped off, you've hopped on the EasyJet, and you've ended up in, let's go for Bordeaux.
Okay.
So you are in Bordeaux, and you are tasked by your editor, okay, you've got 24 hours to find a story that shows the intersection between 2 things. And because I'm the host, I love music. So let's say music, and let's go for football as well.
Okay.
Football and music. And you need to find an article that takes those 2 worlds, puts them together. Where do you even start? How do you even go about doing that? Honestly, I actually think I've made it kind of difficult, but let's see.
No, that sounds completely simple. Yeah, I'm sure I'd find that really easy. I think the first place to go would probably be the football club.
Yeah.
FC Girondins de Bordeaux. I think you'd go and speak to people around the club there and see if it's not uncommon for footballers to have, rap careers or singing careers on the side, or that's, turns out someone's mum was a pop star in the 70s, and I'd probably start there. And then if that was a complete dead end, I think local music schools would be an interesting place to go, or very literally just going around local cafes and pubs and asking people. That's still people have really interesting stories everywhere you go, and especially somewhere like Bordeaux, where it's a really sporty city that love that sort of thing. You're going to find a lot of people with connection to, if not the football club, then the rugby club, the Bagels, and you can quite quickly. One person might point you in the direction of someone else, and that's probably where I would start. I've got no idea where it would end up, and no idea if it would work. But I think that's probably what I'd go for. Yeah.
You know what? I actually think you've done that quite well. Because the reason why I asked that question is to show that there's always different routes that you can take to find a story, and you can find a story no matter where on earth you are. And the thing is, I didn't actually think about because I guess you're right. The players. Yeah, somebody might have a rap career. Somebody might be a musician. Somebody might be a DJ or something like that. Who knows if their mum was like a part of like a Southern French band in the 70s or the 80s. I guess as well, even like football chants as well. There's so many different angles you can take it. Okay, so then with that, I have last few questions before we're going to go into our Fast and Furious round. But prior to recording, we spoke a little bit about your trip to Australia.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about, so it was covering the Ashes, and was it the Australian Open?
Yes.
So the tennis and the golf?
Cricket.
Damn it. I thought for a second, I was like, because I'm not a cricket fan.
No,
so
all good.
Like, ooh, okay, have I got it? Not too bad. But tell me about your experience covering those 2, massive major sporting events. And then I will follow up on the Elvis Festival. And I know for a fact people listening thinking, Elvis Festival, what's he talking about? But let us know. Yeah,
so I was very lucky. I got to spend 6 weeks in Australia. I flew out and landed in Melbourne on Christmas Eve last year, which was just ahead of the 4th Ashes test. So for anyone that was watching, England were 3-0 down at that point. The series was technically dead, and I was quite demoralised, as excited as I was to get to Australia. I then get to the MCG, which is the 105,000 seater stadium in Melbourne on Boxing Day, which is one of the great events in cricket that I was massively excited about. And England ended up winning that test, which was the first time they'd won in Australia in 15 years, which was an unbelievable experience and really sort of kickstarted a great trip. And so I got to do those 2 Ashes tests, and then had a 10-day break in the middle that we'll get onto, and then did 2.5 weeks back in Melbourne for the Australian Open, which was a really great experience. It's an incredibly well-run event, and it felt at points maybe like a bit of a throwback to some of the stories you hear about journalism 30 years ago, where they just think every day. I can't say I partook every day, or to my editors, I never partook. There was media drinks at 5 o'clock every day where they would give you like free cocktails and wine.
Oh,
In like 35 degrees in Melbourne, where you're sat there going, God, life's really hard. This is really stressful. And then you that's what, 6 o'clock in the morning in the UK. So then call your editors a couple of hours later. Yeah, guys, I've been working really hard. It's been really stressful. Obviously, it was hard work, and not undermine it, but they were very good at making it feel like a special experience as well, which was nice. Like I don't think journalism should be that. It didn't, I can't say it made me go any easier on the downsides of the Australian Open, which I wrote about, but it was a nice thing to be able to do and help create some memories and make some friends while being out there, which is, something you should try not to forget to do, because ultimately, you can often go into these events and be like, okay, all I want to do is produce the absolute best piece I can, and I'm going to hide in a corner and not speak to anyone, and then you end up missing out on a lot of stuff and missing out on a lot of great experiences alongside doing your job really well, which is obviously the most important thing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, that sounds like a really fun experience actually as well. Like Melbourne, Australian Open.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just going to bank that just for,
Yeah.
I'll just bank that. And then I guess as well, so that works as a nice segue into, so for those 10 days in between, what on earth was going on?
So I knew I had a bit of a break in the middle, and yes, I wanted to take a couple of days off, but also my editors had said, if there's anything else you can find to do, go out and do it. And so I looked at things that I was in Sydney at that point, and so looked at things that were relatively near Sydney and found the Park's Elvis Festival, which it claims to be the world's largest Elvis festival. It is 5 hours into the outback. And in January in Australia, it was then 40 degrees. And so I hired a car and drove into the outback and had a photographer that came down from Queensland. And we had 3 or 4 days in Parkes, which is this tiny town. And we just spoke to people about why they were at an Elvis festival, because I'd seen it and I was so fascinated as to why people were there and why it even existed, that I sort of assumed readers would be too. And I think that turned out to be true. But it was just an incredible journalistic opportunity, because you could not find somewhere with more colour or human stories or just interesting things to dig your teeth into. And that ended up being an incredibly fun opportunity, even though I'd booked very late, and because it's a small area that doesn't really have many hotels and stuff, I'd ended up staying in a farm cabin down a 10-mile unlit track. The bathroom ended up being infested with fruit flies, which was awful.
Yeah.
But, the sacrifices we make for great journalism. And so I had a couple of the people I interviewed. One was, she'd until recently been the CFO of Channel 9 and Virgin Media Australia, so incredibly high-flying exec that had then had breast cancer and had basically reevaluated her life and decided that she'd always loved performing and always loved Elvis, and she now wanted to be an Elvis tribute artist. No. And so getting to understand a bit about her story and tell it was incredibly fun. So that was great, and I met all sorts of people with, some people have been going 30 plus years to this, festival in 40 degrees. And another great bit, there was a rugby league game that they put on between the sort of local teams, but it was unofficial because it was seen, but that it would potentially besmirch Elvis's good name. And so it was these incredibly drunk Australian rugby league players in Elvis outfits that they clearly got off Temu and bandanas. And I just sat and ended up chatting to some of these local students who were back for the event, and it was just so much fun. Yeah. My photographer as well was just absolutely drowning in the colour and the humanity around it, which is everything you want from someone like that, especially someone that loves feature writing. Yeah,
because I guess as well, it's cool that you had the opportunity to have a little bit of a foray into the world of music almost a little bit more, festivals, arts, culture. How was that experience, doing something that wasn't sport? But it obviously came back to sport in the end anyway.
Yeah. No, it was Yeah, it was really good fun. I like being able to do all sorts of different things. And again, one of the things I love about sport is people. And so you can find, people are just interesting out of sport. And so it was really great to, it felt like a very similar skill set actually than I'd use for, even going to cover something like the Tour de France, where you're just, learning about what's in front of you, and it's just a different thing. So I actually learned all about Elvis and why people love Elvis and how the world sees Elvis in 2026. Yeah.
Did the urge to wear one of their get-ups ever cross your mind?
I can't say I didn't consider it, but it turns out most of them cost like £3,000 to £5,000. So I quite quickly went off the idea. But yeah, no, there were some incredible outfits that people have got just a painstaking detail with.
Yeah, like because I saw the photos as well, and yeah, Elvi being a plural for loads of different Elvises. Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
I did not know that was actually a thing.
No, turns out that it's completely normal there. Everyone's talking about, all these Elvi everywhere, and that feels wrong, but let's run with it. Yeah.
We'll go with that. So then my final question before going into the Fast and Furious round is then, tell me about your time, because The Observer, for example, is a bit more of a newer sort of publication. How is it like? Because you're given like quite a bit of flexibility as well. So could you talk to me a little bit more about that? Just explain it to us a little bit.
Yeah, so I joined 10 months ago now, just after The Observer had been taken over by Tortoise Media. So obviously it's a incredible old brand that is now trying to build its own identity away from The Guardian. And it has been a massive amount of fun trying to work out what The Observer and what a Sunday newspaper that's out on its own looks like in 2026. We're a really small sports team. We've only got 4 writers sort of full time, and that means that there are so many different opportunities that to get into, basically. And I think part of the issue has been knowing where to start and actually being able to narrow myself down enough to say, okay, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, make sure I find time to cover some of the stuff that I really love and I'm passionate about, something like, the darts, which is, secretly my favourite sport. And so I really try and, get some of the good dart stories and stuff when I can, but also, you need to be, if there's a big Premier League game happening on Saturday, most of the time you need to be there because you need to find what the story is there. And so it's just been working out what we want the place to look like, really. We want a sort of big, relatively controversial thing we've done has been not really doing match reports. And so we'll go to games, but it's, as I said, sort of more analysis or comment from a game. And so we're not going to tell you exactly what happened because the BBC does that for free. And so if we want people to pay for our journalism, we need to feel like we need to provide something else on top of that. And so, just working out how to do that well has been an incredibly fun challenge with a really talented group of people that, just care about creating something cool and good.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. And now, with that, it's been brilliant getting to know like all the different facets of your career and why you got into the place and got the awards and the recognition that you have. But now it is time for the Fast and Furious round. Okay. Just saying, the first thing that comes to mind.
Dangerous, okay.
Honestly, these questions, they can trip you up.
Okay.
These are probably the most difficult ones. I've asked some really introspective ones earlier, but these ones are crazy.
Yeah.
Are you an extrovert or are you an introvert?
I'm an introvert.
An introvert. Very nice, to be fair. I haven't had an introvert for quite some time. Night owl or early riser?
Early riser.
Early riser?
Yeah.
I think journalism kind of forces you into one.
I used to work 7 till 4 a lot of the eye, so that really made me an early riser. I've always been quite good at it.
Yeah, that will do it. Dream interview if you haven't interviewed them already.
I don't know if it's the greatest answer, but someone I've been trying to interview for a while and I'm hoping to sort out is Luke Littler. As a massive darts fan, I would love to get into him as a guy.
Yeah, that would be Pretty cool. And so then, favorite concert you've ever been to?
As an introvert, I'm not a massive concert person. I don't often go to concerts. Like I love music, but don't often go to concerts. I went to Glass Animals at the O2 last year. That was really good.
That's really cool. Yeah. And then, okay, what are you currently watching or listening to?
I'm watching BoJack Horseman actually. I've never seen before, but I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. Like I've started it a couple of times, but now I'm looking to get back into it. Finally finish it off.
Yeah. No, I've been really enjoying it.
Best city you've travelled for work?
I've been lucky. I got to do a few good ones. I love New York. I got to do the Ryder Cup last year, but it's probably one of the two Australian ones. So I spent more time in Melbourne, but I think I preferred Sydney, so I'm going to say Sydney. Yeah.
Of course. And then my final question is one word to describe your career as of right now.
Chaos.
And with that, thank you for coming onto the How to Be a Journalist podcast. It's been brilliant hearing your story, and I've had a lot of good fun in this conversation.
Thank you very much. Me too. Yeah.
And just like that, I've been Plamedi Mbungu, and this is How to Be a Journalist.